Hello, good afternoon. Cornell University is located on the traditional homelands of the Cayuga Nation, who are members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, an alliance of 6 sovereign nations with a historic and contemporary presence on this land. The Confederacy precedes the establishment of Cornell University, New York State, in the United States of America. We acknowledge the painful history of the Cayuga dispossession and honor the ongoing connections of the people, past and present, to these lands. A kind reminder to please turn off your cell phones, and books can be purchased after the reading, courtesy of Buffalo Street Books, here in the auditorium, and signed upstairs in the Department of Literature's in English, Goldwin Smith 258 Lounge. Everyone is invited to mingle with our readers, and there will be a Q&A after both readings, if time permits. Welcome to the first in our series of spring readings. The Richard Cleaveland Memorial Reading is part of the Barbara and David Zalaznick Creative Writing Program reading series, which is made possible through the ongoing generosity of the Zalaznicks. Their belief and faith in the importance of literature to create empathy and understanding for a more compassionate global mood allows us to invite distinguishing as well as promising writers to our campus. We remain indebted to their continued support and love. I'd also like to take this opportunity to extend my gratitude to the former chair of our department, Caroline Levine, and to our current chair, Andy Galloway, and of course to our fearless leader, Aishan Hutchinson, our current director of creative writing. A shout out to my creative writing colleagues and especially editor of Epic magazine, Michael Cook. All the members of our department have been working through the historic pandemic with a hopeful attitude and outlook. I can't thank them enough for their graciousness during these great challenges. Who is Richard Cleaveland? If you look at the back of your program, you'll see that there's a really wonderful photograph of him. His great friend, Charles Ferris, described him best, and these are Mr. Ferris's words. Richard Cleaveland was an English major who graduated in 1974. While at Cornell, he and his friends started a student literary magazine that was known as Rainy Day. After he graduated, he remained in Ithaca and published a newspaper known as the Ithaca Grapevine for 5 years before heading west, where he ultimately settled with his wife, Gwen, along a river in Montana and guided fly fishermen. Then Ferris continues. While he was a student, Cleve was a frequent reader at the English department's Temple of Zeus weekly poetry readings, along with other notables you may know, such as Robert Morgan, Ken McLean, who was then a graduate student, Professor Archie Ammons, and even a fellow student by the name of Richard Price. After Cleve died in 1999, his friends and his wife, Gwen, established a reading fund in his name in an effort to perpetuate the process of communion with writers, of which he and his friends were particularly fond when they roamed the halls of Cornell, unquote. This communion with writers is what holds this particular memorial reading in special regards, for it is the only time we showcase our very own writers here at Cornell. We often take for granted those most near to us, and so this is always a special treat for me and for us. I am honored, therefore, to introduce the first of our readers, J. Robert Lennon. John is the author of 3 collections of stories and 9 novels, including Familiar, Broken River, and Subdivision, on sale. His short fiction has appeared in The New Yorker, Granta, the Paris Review, and Harper's, and his criticism in the London Review of Books, The Guardian, and the New York Times Book Review. There are no limits to his energy and imaginative powers. Not only does he continue to write and publish, but is now a musician and composer. His musical career began when John and 4 MFA students created, this is no lie, the Starry Mountain Sweetheart Band. John was a former director of the Creative Writing Program and recently named the Ann S. Bowers Professor of English for his distinguished work both here in and out of our Cornell community. Please give a welcome to John Robert Lennon.
I've taken a rapid test so that you could see my face. Who knows, maybe we'll hire back the Starry Mountain Sweetheart Band. If the dean gets into their music, our music enough, maybe that will be allowed. I really am grateful to the Zalaznicks, of course, for the overarching series, but especially for the friends and family of Richard Cleaveland, who usually in the before times when it was safer to gather, used to come and attend this reading every year. And if you're out there listening, I look forward to getting drunk on $15 cocktails with you again when this is all over. You guys are great. Also, I feel a bit foolish reading my made-up stories to you when our academic and creative peers are being bombed in Kiev. I hated waking up to that news, but I do think it's just a good opportunity to reflect on the fact that we're really lucky that we get to say what we want, gather safely, and that is a freedom that can be taken away. So my thoughts are with the writers and scholars in Ukraine. That said, I am going to read to you my silly made-up stories. This is, I've decided here in my mid-career as a writer to inaugurate a pseudonym and start a crime thriller series. And I'm now attempting to sell the first book. And I'm rewriting it right now. It's called Hard Girls. And this book is about, the protagonist is a woman named Jean. She's in her 30s. She has a 11-year-old daughter named Chloe, who was born in prison. You don't know at this point what the story is behind that. She hasn't spoken to her twin sister, Lila, for like a dozen years. And Lila, in a very cloak and dagger kind of way, gets in touch with her and says, I think I've found our mother, the mother who abandoned them 20 years before. And Jean's reaction is, I don't care. Our mother sucked, and she was unfaithful to her father, and she was neglectful. And Lila, who always thought there was something more to the story, said, no, there is more to it. Forgive me for not being in touch with you, but we have to go find her. So Jean, being kind of dissatisfied with her own life for other reasons, decides that she's going to go with Lila, reunite, try to make up with her, and find the mother. The one thing that Lila has said is, great, if you fly on a plane, don't land within 250 miles of my address, because no one can know where I am. Also, you're not allowed to bring a cell phone, and you cannot rent a car. And Jean says, then how am I supposed to get there? And Lila says, you'll think of something. So, and that's what I'm about to read. She woke from dreamless sleep on the tarmac in St. Louis and wandered, slightly dazed, down the concourse to the food court in the main hub. Her connection was in Terminal E at the other end of the airport. She bought a croissant and a cup of black coffee and took her time watching. It had been a while since she'd allowed herself this kind of attention to strangers. She was out of practice. For the moment, they looked like an undifferentiated mass, the same mass they considered her to be a part of. Each person was enveloped in an invisible shroud, a barrier, impersonal and impermeable. She began to imagine, for every given passerby, what she could say or do to break that barrier. To the once handsome business traveler whose eyes flickered between his phone and every passing woman under 40, whoa, Breitling, my dad had one of those. Is it vintage? To the disheveled goth kid in the Killing Joke t-shirt, when I was your age, I saw them in Poland on the reunion tour. To the elderly woman being conveyed by hospitality attendants to her gate in a motorized cart, after a glance at the ticket she clutched in her ring-encrusted hand. Mrs. Halloway, do you remember me? Nearly everyone could be breached. Something could always be extracted, even if it was just information. At her gate, she studied her fellow passengers, mostly college students. Arkansas State's spring break must also have been this week. A few business travelers dressed in shirts and shoes from Walmart. Some rural-looking men, rough-edged, well-heeled. Farm equipment conventioneers, maybe. Agribusiness owners. A genuinely rich-looking guy in business casual, khakis, button-down shirt, Patagonia vest, loafers without socks. Probably a lawyer. Land use, oil and gas. Something like that. He had a weathered look. Rough skin and hair, like he still spent his vacations pretending to be a country boy. A lesbian couple in their 60s, one of them doing a Sudoku, the other one reading The New Yorker. A man, early 20s, in ripped jeans and flannel shirt, cello case propped between his legs. Jean could lie to these people, gain their confidence. She knew how. She could feel distant parts of herself, yawning, stretching, dusting themselves off. She had an impulse to pull out her phone, text Chloe good morning, check the news, and was glad she couldn't. She hadn't forced herself to focus on the moment like this in years. She was rested and alone, and all her senses were alive. She felt like the precocious child she once was. During her connecting flight, Jean tried and failed to sleep. Imagined Chloe in school, wondered what kind of crushes, conflicts, and other dramas she endured that she never talked about. I should ask more often, Jean told herself. I should ask her later today when I call, after I find a burner phone. On the tarmac in Highville, she retrieved her sunglasses from her bag and put them on. She waited until the plane emptied out before getting up and calmly disembarking. It was 7:34 a.m. and surprisingly crowded in this small airport. That was good. She found a restroom, and when she emerged, picked up an abandoned copy of the Democrat Gazette and pretended to wait for a flight out. What she was really doing was watching. She was looking for a particular kind of person, ideally a businesswoman, who carried a big handbag, moneyed but a little harried, fidgety. There was one candidate here, a woman in her 20s with a grad student look, dirty eyeglasses, hair pulled back, leather tote. She was reading a library book, but she appeared alert and vigilant, and she kept an arm over the bag. Jean had arrived on the far end of Concourse A. There were 11 gates here, and another 10 on the west side of the airport on Concourse B. She decided to make her way to the central corridor, get a coffee and pastry, and survey the scene. Most of the gates were empty at this hour. She'd looked it up. 50 flights left here every day, most of them clustered in late morning and early afternoon. But the woman she wanted was mostly likely to be here now. And if she was traveling alone on a Saturday morning, she was likely single. And if she was married, her husband or wife was probably asleep. Either way, she would probably drive her own car and leave it in the long-term lot. Jean walked, watched, ate her scone, sipped her coffee. She found two more women, one in late middle-aged, angry-looking, expensive shoes, big unstructured floral canvas bag, appearing to be headed off on vacation. The other, younger, talking on the phone and reading what looked like legal documents, Kate Spade work tote gaping open. She finished the scone, threw out the coffee, and was about to settle on the lawyer when the perfect Mark suddenly appeared, hurried past her, and ran into the women's restroom. The woman was in her mid-30s, blousy and ill at ease in her clothes, an off-the-rack gray pantsuit that made her twitch and fidget. She was blinking furiously, poking and tugging at the corner of her eye, and talking on the phone. A big navy blue suede tote hung from her shoulder, gaping open. As she passed, Jean heard her say, "Be there by 1, Hubert. The flight was delayed half an hour. I will be there." Jean pocketed her sunglasses and entered the restroom. The Mark was standing at the row of mirrors, rummaging in the bag. Her phone lay face down next to one of the sinks. Its case bore the image of a dog, Labradoodle, that she vaguely resembled. There was one other woman in the room, visible only as a pair of keds underneath the door of a toilet stall. It quickly became clear that the woman's contact lens had gotten lost in her eye. She was leaning over, squinting at the mirror, rolling her eyes around in an effort to snap it back into place. "Oh, God," Jean said, putting her duffel on the floor and drawing a small compact from her pocket. "Contact? Always at the worst moment. The thing gets lost." "Oh, geez," Jean said. "Your phone's in a puddle." Without hesitation, she picked up the woman's phone, wiped it on her sleeve, and dropped it into the open bag. She stole a glance at the bag's contents. The woman's keys were clearly visible at the bottom of a zippered side pocket, which was also gaping open. A bottle of contact lens solution was among the items haphazardly scattered throughout the main compartment. The woman seemed slightly taken aback at Jean's having touched her phone, but appeared reassured by her smile. "You know the trick," Jean said. "Trick? It feels like it's way back there, but it's really always just stuck to the underside of your eyelid. You have to get it wet. Then you can just close your eyes, look up, and kind of wiggle it around like you're watching a tennis match. Yeah, I guess I do something like that. Jean patted her chin and cheek with powder. I've got some solution if you need it. No, I've got it. From her bag, the woman produced the bottle Jean had seen, and she tipped her head back and squirted some into her eye. She gazed into the mirror, then, after a glance at Jean, closed her eyes and started moving them around. Swiftly, with her free hand, Jean reached into the woman's bag, closed her hand around the keys, and transferred them to her jacket pocket. Behind them, a toilet flushed, and a small woman in her 40s emerged. She moved towards the sink row. The Mark opened her eyes, blinking. Did you get it? Oh my God, yes. Jean snapped her compact shut. There you go. Thank fucking God, the Mark said. The other woman, washing her hands now, scowled at the curse. Something about the sound of her own voice reminded the Mark of her earlier suspicions. She peered into her own bag, then pulled out her phone with obvious relief. She threw the contact lens solution back in. Cute dog, Jean said, pocketing her compact. She shouldered her bag. That's Big Ed. Big Ed! I feel like a heel kenneling him, but what are you going to do? He'll make some friends, maybe. Ha! Hope they like slobbering. Well, Jean said, see you around. Safe travels. You too. Jean couldn't tell if what she was feeling was paranoia or exhilaration. She was sweating freely under both arms and only felt calm after she'd passed the security checkpoint. There was no going back now. If she'd missed her guess, she'd have to find some other way to Lila. The air was warm and moist here despite the bright sun. Thin pink clouds were dashes over the flat, distant horizon. The long-term parking lot was large, open, and mostly full of pickup trucks and SUVs. The Mark's keyring was awkward and busy, its house and work keys color-coded with plastic sheaths. A keychain ornament bore another picture of Big Ed, and another one the name Vanessa. And there was a long metal whistle, presumably to ward off attackers. The key fob was from a Scion. She could just double lock it now, and the horn would lead the way. But she wanted to forestall the moment she learned she was wrong. The lot was moderately sized, about 20 double rows of cars stretching about 100 yards into the distance. She positioned herself in roughly the middle and made her way from row to row, in between the cars, alert for the familiar boxy outline. The car could be a sedan, but Jean doubted it. The woman had a big fluffy dog and considered herself quirky. No doubt she had the cube and didn't want to let it go, despite its age. She thought she found it once, but it was a Honda Element. And then, in the third row from the end, she saw it, a bright red, dusty shoebox. She approached, walked around it, dent in the driver's side door where the Mark once opened too fast at a gas station, MSU Bears window sticker, my other car is a UFO, Hillary 2016. Inside, a mess, Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee cups, a pair of running shoes, some junk mail, dirty tennis balls, chewed up Frisbee, backseat covered in gray dog hair. Jean squeezed the fob, the car unlocked, and she climbed inside. There was no parking receipt that she could find, so she took off her sunglasses, messed up her hair, and made herself cry. It took 10 seconds. Her technique was to recall the moment in her life of greatest joy. It would be hard to explain to somebody else, so she'd never bothered to try, but this moment had occurred when she was in prison. It was late winter, a time when, due to the vagaries of the HVAC, her cell was always either too hot or too cold, and she was always either throwing her blanket off or shivering, pulling it back on. Being pregnant made it worse. She'd just spent her first trimester nauseated and ill at ease. Then one night, it would have been in March, a heat wave moved through the state. It started in the evening. As they were led back to their cells after counseling, they peered up through the high window of the block to watch the clouds racing across the moonlit sky. During the night, the heat stayed off, and she slept better than she had in years. The whole prison was buzzing with excitement the next day. In the cafeteria and in the laundry where she worked, you could feel it. At 3, they were led out into the yard. The sun shone. The snowmelt had left paths across the concrete. The air was cool and dank. You could smell the mud, the dankness of the pulp mill on the other side of the valley. She slipped her hand under her uniform top and felt the swell of her belly. A collective sigh from the inmates seemed to lift Jean up. She was glad, for the first time in months, to be alive. That's what she thought of now, in the Mark's car, as she backed out of the spot, navigated to the end of the row, and turned onto the access road. She relaxed the muscles in her chest and face and shoulders. She smiled at herself in the rear view, showing her teeth. She blinked. Out loud, she said brightly, 10. Then she imagined herself being pulled down into darkness, the force of gravity increasing, the air thickening, pressing more and more heavily on her. As she counted down, she let her cheeks sag, her shoulders slump. It was more about the physical sensations of joy and misery than about the emotions themselves. She didn't have to think of sad things. Her body responded naturally. Her face in the mirror aged 5 years, and as she pulled up to the kiosk, the tears began to flow. I'm sorry, she said to the old man sitting there. I just got here. Do you remember me? I just passed through. I'm sorry, I don't have my ticket. I don't know what happened to it. I had to cancel my trip. I'm sorry, the kennel called. Ma'am, they don't know what happened. He just died. Big Ed. He had a heart attack or something. I don't know. I should never have put him in the kennel. Okay, if you could just, I'm sorry, could you let me out? I don't know what to do. I have to pick up his body. She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. All right, ma'am, all right, there you go. Next time, keep the ticket somewhere safe. There you go. The gate rose. Thank you, she said as she passed under it. She left the window open. By the time she reached the county highway, she was laughing. Thanks. I just got to remask it.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much. Mukoma Wa Ngugi is an associate professor in the Department of Literatures in English. And it seems, thinking about his career, he's a spectrum of talent. I mean, what doesn't he do well, you know? He is the author of a recently released Unbury Our Dead with song, as well as The Rise of the African Novel, Politics of Language, Identity, and Ownership. He has written a number of award-winning novels titled Black Star, Nairobi, and Nairobi Heat, and 2 books of poetry, Logotherapy, which is here, and Hurling Words at Consciousness. His novel, Mrs. Shaw, was released in Eastern Africa as We the Scarred in 2020. And Nairobi Heat has just been optioned by a major Hollywood studio. Andale, I can just see it. Everything Makuma creates as a poet, scholar, academician, playwright, or novelist is underlined with his belief that, quote, as an African and a Black person, I feel that I have the duty to love all the places I call home. Love need not always be pleasant. It can be demanding, defensive, angry, and wrong. But it always wants to build, not destroy. Please welcome to the mic, Makuma. You are. You're the man.
Thank you. No, thank you, and thank you for coming out. So I've been thinking of all sorts of jokes, you know. Oh, hold up. Okay, the first one is I did my test. Yeah, the first one was home court advantage, you know. Doing a reading at home. Yeah, but what I've been thinking about is the book Unbury Our Dead. It had never occurred to me until now, right? Until I'm here. That is actually very, very much tied to Cornell, right? You know, in 2 ways. One, that, okay, all right. My students who are here will know I love telling stories, so sometimes I have to go back and, all right, so Unbury Our Dead is about Tizita, right? Tizita music. Tizita is a form of Ethiopian blues. When you walked in, that's what you are hearing, right? But it's not just blues. It's a very particular song to Ethiopian culture, right? And to an extent where families will have fights, over who is the best Tizita musician. My coming across the Tizita happened when I was in Boston in the early 2000s. I was at a party as well, in the 2000s, what would you be doing except be at a party? I mean, the world was ending. Yeah. Anyway, so I was at a party with fellow Africans, some of them from Ethiopia, and And in the chaos of the party, right? In the chaos of the party, a song played, right? A song played, and it just caught me. And, of course, in the chaos of the party. So, but later, I kept asking my friends, what is this song? What was that song? What was that song? But nobody could find it. We're talking about CDs and tapes, and nobody, I guess, had time to, to dig through it. But it's a song, and one of the things I say in the novel, what the character says, that like when you hear your first zita and you fall in love with it, you'll know, right? So that was my first zita. And I looked for the song, and then eventually I couldn't find it until when I applied for a job here, right, in 2012. And our colleague, Dagmai Waboshet, and you guys should ask why he left, because he really was a great colleague, university politics. But anyway, he was here, right? And when you're applying for a job, of course, you look at who is there, so you can read up a little bit, so you can do your interviews. So in the course of looking him up, I found his essay on James Baldwin and the Tizita, right? And at that point, it just clicked, right? You know what I mean? For me, it had been almost like a 10-year journey of this song, searching and so on and so forth. And then it just clicked. In 2012, we had Google, so I spent time Googling. And then I'm not sure if the music I listen to now is the exact song, but I know the sentiment of it. So from there, then, and I'm going back to the story of how it ties back to Cornell. Well, we have Dagmari, though. I used to commute. My partner was doing residency in Norwalk, Connecticut. Don't ask why we ended up there, but that's where we were. So I used to commute 4 hours back and forth, right? So all I did for, I don't know how many years, all I did was listen to the Tizita, like in the car, right? So I would say, if it wasn't for a confluence of factors, right, some of them associated with Cornell, then probably the novel wouldn't exist, right? So what happened with during the drive would be, so I'm listening to the songs obsessively, right? First I don't speak Amharic. It's almost as if, I don't know, it was an obsession. It still is. That's all I listen to till today, really, right? But I can tell you the beauty of of the moment when the song broke. Like how in golf, I don't play golf, but I know the term. When the song broke for me, right? And it was, at that point, I realized, of course, other people know this, but fine, I didn't know, so it was a discovery for me, here's my other joke. In Germany, they give you wine. No, but anyway, when the song broke, and I could hear the voice, and just the simplicity of the voice being an instrument, right? So I was no longer looking for meaning, right? So the voice became an instrument in concert with all these other instruments, right? Still not wine. So anyway, that's the history behind it. But I also wanted to add a few things. I should set my timer. Mm-hmm. So how long do we have?
Just about 20 minutes.
All right. Okay. Mm-hmm. But part of the stories behind the book, are some of them. So I did my MA in Boston, in MA creative writing, blah 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 blah. But with no offense to all right. I'm just trying to speed up given the time constraint. All right, so but I had this friend of mine who was teaching at BU at that point, and we would go to this place called Charles River Pub. It was a hole in the wall. Right, and we'd go there because the beer was cheap, but it was a place that was housed by Ethiopians, or the clientele was mostly Ethiopians and Eritreans, right? So, but this is around the 2000s, and at that point, the Eritrean and Ethiopian war had broken out. So, and I'm saying this in memory or just recognizing also that there is war going on now in Ethiopia, right? But what was interesting to us, okay, we are Kenyans, so we are neutral, right? So at the beginning, we all drink together and so on and so forth. But when the war broke out, the Eritreans and Ethiopians would, find in the same bar, but there was that sort of a division, right? Yeah, so I don't know. So to me, it's the interest of people being divided, right? Fundamentally, but also the role of music in not necessarily healing, because that's the point about the Tizita. It's not healing. The Tizita is telling you're going to die. I mean, like literally, right? Not literally, but because. Okay, let me read a passage. All right, so in the novel, what happens is you have four competing musicians, four competing Tizita musicians, who end up in a city in Nairobi boxing club to compete to see who can sing the best Tizita song, right? So and of course in real life. Okay, let me tell you another quick story then. Yeah? Mm-hmm. All right, so no, because it's good to grasp the centrality of the Tizita. I think at least for how I saw it. So I'm Kenyan American and plus. But when I was in Ethiopia to see Dagmawi, we were there actually with Aishan. We ended up in this bar, like late at night, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And it so happened that there was a Tizita musician there, Mandingo, whom you might have heard if the song came on. And so he was invited on stage by the band. And this is something you never see in Kenya or most places, right? Everybody just sat down, sobered up and listened, right? So I don't know, to my mind, that question of what is it about the sound? What is it about the song? That will pull people over the dance floor, make them sit down at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and just listen, right? And then of course, after that, then, the song ended and then, the party continued. Anyway, so in this case, so the musicians are on stage for this competition. Mm-hmm. All right. When I got here, I never used to wear glasses. I was 20/20 vision. Anyway, okay, all right, okay. All right. Well, mm-hmm. All right, okay. So they're on stage. The four musicians. Oh, I should explain them. The musicians, one is called the Taliban Man, who is this sort of young hip-hop-ish, but playing the Tizita. The other one is called the Diva / Kidane, right? She has a... Okay, for you Americans, so you can relate. No, it would be. I don't know if you ever see videos of people like Whitney Houston when they actually go to a small place and play, right? Where then now they're just singing, right? It's almost like a split personality, right? They have the stage presence and then also they have these intimate spaces. So for Kidane is Kidane when she's in those intimate spaces. Then when she's the diva when then she's going full Whitney Houston, and then Miriam, who is an old bartender at the boxing club at the city place, and then the corporal, who is a wounded war veteran, right? Okay, I'm resisting the temptation. Okay, to tell another story. All right, okay. Yeah, okay. I'm glad I. All right, okay. Okay, but quickly. All right. No, sorry. I'll get to the reading, but quickly. No, I actually thought I'd actually escape this story, but okay. So one of the most fascinating stories, and this is behind the corporal's character, right? Okay, you guys know about Sonny Boy Williamson 1 and Sonny Boy Williamson 2, blues. Anybody? Aha, this is where I tell stories. All right, so Sonny Boy Williamson 2 is the better known blues musician, right? Like if you look up blues and stuff like that, he'll be better known. But it turns out there was a Sonny Boy Williamson one, the original, right? So, Sonny Williamson 2 came and took over essentially the identity of the original Sonny Boy Williamson, right? And so the corporal has that sort of a duality, right? We don't know exactly who he is, whose identity he has stolen, and so on and so forth. All right. On stage, the musicians were enjoying themselves too much, and they left us behind. And by the time we caught up, it was to find Miriam playing the accordion, looking so slight and bent forward that I worried about her. But she was at it, pulling, ebbing, and letting out a gentle, church organ-sounding song, the accordion lungs expanding and contracting gently, breathing in and out layered prayers. She was swaying side to side, dipping in and out, lifting one foot in and out, wading out of the river of the Tizita that as yet had no words. She stomped her feet, ran her right hand against her left on the accordion to create a confused, upside-down rainbows of sound, and then a caesura. The silence transfixed the drunkards, gamblers, slummers, and the believers in place. The silence moved from being expectant to bordering on being painful. At the end of that silence, where the pain was turning into relief, the corporal with the masenko came in and bowed a long, devilish, trembling bass, low and threatening. But the Taliban man was not going to have us threatened, and his guitar, with its clean, thin sound, note for note, came in. Miriam stomped her feet again, and silence reigned once again. And from that silence, she started singing low, long moans, gliding above and underneath the lazy accordion. The Taliban man's guitar was getting more urgent, while the diva on the piano was furious, and the corporal on his devilish masenko held everything together. Then the corporal left his post and came in with low, buzzing sounds of the masenko, mourning that was amplified by the slow wail of the accordion as Miriam pulled it apart. Her voice, with a contained rasp, came in once again. The Taliban man did a violent lead solo. The diva's piano jumped into the fray, playing peaceful but sharp, short, determined notes that threatened to undermine the Taliban's work. They both went on for a while as we clapped and cheered and clapped the beat. They played on, helping each other up when one of them faltered with the beat and timing. A few minutes into the jam, Miriam looked at the Taliban man, and he slowed down his syncopated guitar playing, and others followed suit. Silence, save for the slow hum bars of the masenko and the sound of the accordion slowly running out of air. She winked at me. This once she said in English, and she bent her voice low and joined the masenko. When I dream of happy days, O Tizita, wake me so I can find you once again. I fear so much that you too will leave me and I'll forget this pain that carries my love. And Tizita, if I forget those I loved, how can I remember who I am? One day I'll be dead and gone, my grave untended, date of birth and death on my gravestone from centuries past, and only my Tizita will remain. Only you will remain. Tizita, what I fear the most is that I'll forget this pain that carries my love. Okay, in my haste to tell stories, I forgot to talk a little bit about how the Tizita is talked about. So a lot of people talk about it in terms of nostalgia, or memory or longing, right? Since we let Dagmawi go, I can tell you stories about him. All right. So, okay, that was funny. Yeah, yeah. So when I read his essay and I realized this is the music I'm looking for, I was like, come on, dude, you have to tell me what the Tizita is about. And he said, oh yeah, in fact, I have this Ethiopian friend, who has done a documentary on the Tizita. So at that point, we're at Oxford for a conference. Why don't we go meet up with him and we'll have a beer and we'll transcribe the music for you, right? So, okay, what is crazy is... No, sorry. What is crazy is they couldn't get past the first two lines, right? Because they ended up arguing back and forth for like an hour. Yeah, so we couldn't get past the first two lines. But generally, the song, it's supposed to be about nostalgia, memory. But But the whole novel is trying to understand what the song is about, right? So the next passage I'm going to read will be now the corporal trying to explain, hopefully with some success, what the Tizita is. Mm-hmm. All right, so, okay. So, and the main character is called Manfredi. So Manfredi is unlike me, right? He comes from a family that, that was part of the dictatorship. I come from the other side. And his quest is trying to understand why or where he's coming from in terms of, being part of the problem, right? And I'll tell you a quick story. Okay, 11 minutes. All right, so, okay, Manfredi is inspired by, because all this, all these things come in, right? Manfredi is inspired by a person I met in the 1990s, right? Who was part of, okay, fine, I come from a political family, right? So my dad was put in jail, blah, blah, exiled, and so on and so forth. But the one question I never asked is, how are the people on the other side experiencing, like my age mates, right? How are they experiencing it, right? When indeed their parents are part of the government or in the dictatorship and so on and so forth. But I did meet, so I did meet this person in the early 1990s who was actually part of the chain. No, not her, but her father was part of the chain that put my father in detention, right? And she had so much guilt, like just good old-fashioned guilt. It's almost like she wanted me to absolve her, right? And so Manfredi is that sort of the character who is narrating, the I in the novel is that character who is, coming from a dictatorship, wealthy, and so on and so forth, but on a search, right? So and his search becomes a Tizita. So this is the corporal now talking to Manfredi, right? A quick story though. No, okay, I'm going to use my time well. Oh, no, because I'm thinking about the Cornell connection. Okay, so Cornell connection, because of the commute back and forth, I had to rent a place, right? I had to rent a place. Larry knows the place I'm talking about, right? I had to rent a place that was close by here, but behind it was a graveyard. Well, no, it turns out, this novel wouldn't exist without it. But the graveyard wasn't of new graves, right? It was of old graves that are not tended, right? If you go back to the scene I read, right? So, and I remember sometimes I would just go chill there, have a beer, it's quiet, and peaceful. No, but really it was. I mean, but really it was. So, but then sometimes I just walk around, let's say there's moonlight, you walk around and then you're looking at the gravestones. And then you realize that these gravestones are from, 1800s, right? And then the realization then that's where we'll all end up. I mean, like eventually, we think our graves will be permanent, but eventually they're just going to be something where somebody walks around with a brewski. Looking at your dates. Yeah, so the question is then, and that's part of the novel, what remains of us? What remains of us? Okay, so this is the corporal then trying to answer that question. To Manfredi. The soul, is that a bit vague? I asked him. And then he answers, because it's unknown, we want to call it unknown because that is easy. Think about the first death. The Tizita to me, for me, is that sound of the first death, the recognition and the surprise and the realization, that first consciousness, they realized it was going to be no more. And you wanted to leave a message in a bottle that becomes me and you. With the Tizita, I can feel it. I know it, but I cannot speak it. So I sing the Tizita because it will echo in your soul, sound waves from yesterday, meet in yours, and perhaps we shall understand something that we do not have words for yet. All I can say is, you can walk for a very long time and get where you're going, but all along, little bits of yourself are left along the way, and you get to where you're going, and there is no going back without stepping on yourself, and there is no going forward without eventually tearing your entrails out of your body. The Tizita is that impossibility. I am dead and buried, and I'm alive and well at the same time. When I sing, I know what that is, even though when I stop, I cannot explain it. An understanding with no words, only sound. Let me put it this way. Historians record history, and even though they're competing versions, it is there on paper. In science, every discovery and invention is directly tied to the previous one, an archive that is also new. But human emotion, feeling, where is the archive? Philosophy and psychology explain, but where is the archive that we can visit to learn about what that first human being felt on first experiencing love or the tragedy of losing a loved one? That first parent to bury their child. We fall in love, and it feels like it's not for the first time. We assume the emotion of love does not contain the archive of past loves. From generation to generation, all the way back to that living thing that first gruffly grunted, I see, I love. Sound, I think the corporal was trying to tell me, expresses the archive, a 200,000-year-old archive of extreme human emotions, right? And I think for me that's the closest I could get to trying to. Okay, this is a character, of course, yeah, but trying to understand what the Tizita is. Okay, I have 3 minutes. All right. Okay, so but I want to read one passage. It's a bit I don't know. So the characters are free, right? You know, and I've said elsewhere that I think this is the first novel I've written where I actually envy the characters because of their freedom, right? But in this particular scene, Manfredi Manfredi follows the musicians back to Ethiopia so he can do his journalism, his investigative journalism, and tell their story and so on and so forth. So in this particular scene, he has gone to visit Kidane. This is the diva, right? But she lives in a village. So in the village is Kidane, where she has kids and a husband, and almost like a completely different life. Okay, so he goes there. He meets the kids, meets the family, blah 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 blah, and then he decides to go to bed, but he's too tired, and he can't sleep. Right, so he decides late at night to walk down and get a drink. A lot of us do that. Anyway, so okay, I undressed, hopped into bed, and tried to fall asleep, but I was exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that makes sleeping impossible. I called Allison, that's his girlfriend, only for her to sleepily tell me to fuck off. A drink seemed like the next best thing. On my way to the kitchen, I noticed the light was on in the small room with the piano, and I decided to turn it off. But Kidana was in there, stark naked, headphones on, playing a song I could not hear. In space and heaven, there is no sound, she had said back at the ABC, that's back in Nairobi. This was as close as I was ever going to get to hearing, or rather witnessing, music without sound. I did not dare enter to disturb her, so I just stood there, observing a naked woman, her hair down to her back, her figure shaking gently, and at other times violently, as her hands moved across the keyboard, sometimes so forcefully that I could feel reverberations on the wooden floor and up on my naked feet, and other times so softly that all I could hear was a light flutter. Sometimes she would hum, but without the music, the melody sounded disjointed. It was like watching a painting come alive. I could get why she was playing late into the night, but naked? To stand naked before the Tizita, to share vulnerabilities, to feel it on her skin in a way that she could not in front of an audience? Or was it just too hot and she thought I would be sleeping? Or was it my dream? I could have stood there and watched her for hours, but I had the key turning. It was her husband returning. And understanding there would be no easy way to explain why I was standing there watching his naked wife playing sound music. I took that as my cue and quickly went back to bed. Okay, I'll stop there.
Time for a few questions, and also Aurora is going to have, or Emily, actually has a microphone.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Repeat. You don't have to repeat your question. You raise your hand, and she'll come to you to the microphone.
Storytelling.
Any questions?
Yeah, but I also wanted to say there are some students who are stalking me. No, I'm joking. No. No, it's nice to see you guys, actually. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much to both of you. And I just wanted to ask John what prompted this shift in genre. In your case, you've explored many different genres in your career. Is it because this was the one left, or the only one left that you hadn't done, or what was it?
We've talked about my book Broken River, which is sort of like is kind of a thriller, but with the story of a disastrous marriage and a kind of strange narrative tack that I take throughout. I sort of personify the narrative drive in the book, and it was so much fun to write. And I thought, what if I made it less literary? Maybe someone would pay me a lot of money for it. And then I was sort of talking with my wife about it and saying like, oh, just no one, I had a couple of books come out last year. They were not hits. I was like, I want people to read the damn books. Maybe I should write a thriller. And then I just said, twin sisters who were con women and maybe their mom was a spy. And she looked at me like,
sounds good.
Yeah, I was like,
sounds good.
Okay, sure. So it ended up being really fun to do. And I don't know if someone will publish it, but if they do, I would be thrilled. It'd be a fun side project.
Both of you are engaging the psychology of women in different ways. Mukoma's is more literally like a gaze, but the other author was sort of, speaking literally from the psychological perspective of being this woman. Could you both talk more about why? Not in a like confrontational way, but like not like that. I just think it's interesting.
Yeah, no, okay. So I mean, part of it is I don't know. For me, it's a little bit personal. So, but I'll say it anyway, right? Because okay. So, for example, and I'm not trying to brag, but my dad is getting the Pen Nabokov Award. And I'll be one of the presenters on Monday, right? And part of my speech will be about my mother, right? Because there are ways in which is this being recorded? Oh shit! Okay, no, I'm joking though. no, but part of it is like the erasure, right? Like the erasure of even personally, like in my personal life, my grandmother used to. Whom I model Miriam after her. She used to carry bullets and food, to the resistance against British colonialism, right? So in a way, I don't think I can write. Or let me put it this way: I might do a bad job of writing them, but I don't want to be part of the problem. I don't want to be part of writing them out of history, right? Yeah.
I guess.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, my ostensible answer is, it's funny because I think men get praised for writing about women more often than women get praised for writing about men, because I think the assumption is that the stories about men are the default, right? In my case, it's half the people I know are women, so about half the time I end up writing female narrators. In this case, I wrote about twin sisters because it just seemed like a silly thriller plot idea. It seemed like, and I later looked it up. There's a whole subgenre of twin thrillers. It turns out. But the more I got into it, the more I thought like, okay, well, if they have a difficult relationship with their mother suddenly, and one of them has a daughter, it becomes about mothers and daughters, right? It becomes about people manipulating each other, and some of the people they're manipulating are women because they are women and know how to do the thing that would upset them, right? There are lots of male characters in the book, of course, but in this case, I just drew upon. I hired a friend who's a lawyer as a sensitivity reader to make sure I was getting things right that I might otherwise have been uncomfortable submitting to a publisher, and drew upon a lot of my first readers for my early drafts of novels are women writers. So, you know, I don't always get it right, and I'm informed vigorously when I don't by my peers. So I don't know. I feel like it's something we all ought to know how to do, especially these days. I feel like everybody of different groups is sort of telling their own stories these days, and so I feel a little bit more of an obligation to do it well if I'm going to do it. But in this case, I enjoyed it, and I hope it turned out okay.
Hello. Thank you both for reading. This question is perhaps more for, I was wondering for Professor Mukoma. I was wondering, how do you think about your readers, or if you think about them at all when you're writing, with regards to, for example, setting? So, like, would you expect your reader to pick up on all the details and the subtleties that you're putting in, or do you not think about the reader at all?
No, because I mean, I'm political. I have an agenda, right? You know, so I have a reader in mind. So, for example, with Nairobi Heat, my readers were Black Americans, South African Americans, and Africans, right? With this novel, what I did was, and this is, I guess, the hubris of writing. I told myself, okay, what if okay, what if I could take my imagination, okay, for better or worse, but of course in my head I'm thinking for the better, right? What if I could take all that I am, right, and put it into African aesthetics, or exploring African aesthetics, right? So I would say this novel clearly, it's, you know, it takes place in Kenya and Ethiopia, so it's an African novel. But what happens though are the surprises, right? With Nairobi Heat, one of the surprises was that it became, you know, like a book people read at, you know, in book clubs and stuff like that. And for me, the most surprising one was, I don't know, like some town somewhere in the U.S. where their friend had died from cancer, and, you know, yeah, and they were just doing crime fiction and they were reading the book. So you can have an audience, and then, and then whatever you're writing will go above the audience. No, not above, but will go beyond, right? Your targeted audience. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh. All right. So I'm translating. Okay. So now I'm just gonna. Okay, just a minute. Okay. So I work with African languages, or working on African languages, and so on and so on and so on. Mm-hmm. And so does my father, right? So he's translating the River Between, which he wrote in his 20s. He's translating into Gikuyu, right? And for him, when he's translating it, he's saying it's almost as if he's translating it into, it's almost as if the book is already in Gikuyu, which is our language, right? But for me, I started translating Nairobi Heat, and precisely the question you asked hit me, right? No, okay, so yeah, my standard answer would have been, like you have different audiences, and it can go beyond the audience, but it became a question of, okay, if I'm translating a book that's set in the U.S. dealing with African American issues, right? How then do I translate that back into Gikuyu, right? And then all the questions of translation kicked in, which then made me start thinking in terms of language itself determining who your audience is. Yeah. Mm.
Oh, can I just add something too? Mm. I actually, for years, I love Mukoma's 2 mystery novels, and it's always made me think, like, man, I should write some mystery novels too. I can be a professor who writes mystery novels like him. So,
but on the other hand, he did get 2 reviews on the same day in the New York Times. Was it the New York or the New York Times? Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, 2 different books, two different reviews. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's mutual.
Oh. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, the photographer missed that.
Thank you both for reading. Mukoma, this is a question for you about the Tizita as a musician. When you first hear your first Tizita and you fall in love, do you think that that love is because the music makes you remember a longing that you've always had? Or is it that the music itself is what you are longing for, and that sort of search that you described to get back to it? I know that's not a very straightforward question.
No, it's a great question. It's a great question. All right, so if you take it, okay, I would say both, right? But I would say more immediately that Tizita is linking you to life, and your own mortality and your own continuity. That's my understanding of it. Of course, Ethiopians might, say I'm fetishizing, I'm fetishizing the music. But I think ultimately it's a question of. Okay, so one of the questions that I, for most writers when the pandemic happened was having a book come out, right? Because you can't be feted, and because there are no public, so it's sort of boring having a book come out, when you can't do live events, and this is why this is great as well. So at that point I started thinking, okay, so I was actually even thinking of asking the publisher to postpone it, but then it occurred to me, like, what's a better time? For a book that's talking about it's not really mortality. It's not really a question of what you leave behind. A question of what life itself needs, right? So for continuity, right? So, and then if you had sound to it, if life could sing a song, right? If life could sing a song, what would it sound like, right? And it would contain all those things, right? It will contain the past, of course. It will tell you that you're gonna die, but you'll continue on with this song. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I would say it's a great question. I would say it's both. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We have time for one more.
Yeah, I know. I've begun to sound like a hippie after this novel, really.
Yeah. Hi, Mukoma. I was thinking about your translation. The book set in Ethiopia. I'm wondering, whether you're translating always about what these characters are saying in this language, and into for an American audience or for English-speaking audience.
So for Manfredi, the character, he's blind as well, right? So because he doesn't speak Amharic and he's aware of it. So the only way, in the same way for me, all right, okay, so, okay, going back to Glissant, right? Eduardo Glissant, where he talks about opacity, right? The idea that it's okay to have things that are not known, right? So I have to say I was working with that because neither the main character or I speak Amharic, and even if we did, I think it was a blessing actually, that I don't speak Amharic because then I got that break of listening to the voice and sound. I don't know. Somebody. I did a book tour in Kenya. I know. I'm bragging. It was warm, but but one of the questions somebody asked me was, and I'm not saying that's what you're asking, but one of the questions was, would I, as a Kenyan, writing about Ethiopia, be appropriating? Right. In other words, can an African appropriate from another African, and so on and so forth? And the answer I gave then wasn't satisfactory, but the answer I would give now would be that I don't think so, right? The cultures are so intertwined anyway. Even though for us we think of them as stable identities, right? When you look at me, you see me as a Gikuyu if you're Kenyan, right? But I did a DNA test. My students will recognize this. But I did a DNA test to prove that we are creolized. Again, going back to Glissant, that we are born creolized, right, from the very, very beginning. And it turned out I'm 10% Ethiopian. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but the question of audience and translation, yeah, and also, do you leave some things untranslated, right? Do you leave some things untranslated? How much work do you want the reader to do? For those sort of questions, I say tell the story, just tell the story, and then, or do you do glossary notes and stuff? I say just tell the story.
All right, the books are on sale here. If you have any more questions, you can come upstairs to the English Department Lounge and mingle with these two wonderful writers. But the books are on sale right here. All right, thank you so much.
If you don't have a book, we won't mingle. Okay, no, I'm joking, really, of course. Yeah.